the other report.
Could you do that?
Keep in mind, this is the packet I prepared with presents.
Resolution of the public works. I think we're reading the email.
Yeah, the public works, the broadband, and the TA report came separately.
The TA I couldn't print out. It just came, it just said TA in the subject and that was it. Anything else?
Yeah, I looked at it on my phone, I couldn't make it.
I did the best I could. All right, thank you.
Everybody, 6 o'clock, Wednesday, March 1st, 2023. We have Carol on Zoom joining us. She's out of town currently for business. All right, so I'll call the meeting to order for items not on the agenda for discussion, not action. All right, moving on to town reports. Town administrator report.
Bear with me here. All right, so the town administrator report, which apparently got blank in the email, it was up on the website. Just a couple of things, nothing major. So the Keep Cumberland County Warm Grant, we've had a couple applicants. Once again, it's a $50,000 grant that is being provided by the state of Maine. The requirements are less stringent than general assistance. And so anybody that needs heating assistance in whatever form, I would encourage to contact the town office and apply for that. This is a grant that runs through mid-April. And so we as a community, we as a municipality have up to $50,000 that we can provide as long as people qualify for heating assistance. Hope Island visit, Jim Butler, and it's supposed to say Jackie Robbins, not Jackie Travis. Sorry about that. And myself, Jim Butler is the one that coordinated the visit on a day that Jackie is going to be here. So the plan is to be picked up by members of Hope Island on Tuesday, March 21st. And to go out there and for the code enforcement officer to see what changes are taking place due to the a large amount of building permits that have been submitted, and for the code enforcement or for the assessor to properly assess the property. So I know there was an interest of 2 board members to attend. So if you guys want to let me know which 2 board members want to go, I can make sure that those individuals are included on the communications.
Make a suggestion that we offer an invitation to our representative from DEP to go with us. I think our work with Hope on an ongoing basis is going to benefit from as much communication and cooperation with that agency as we possibly can have. They've got deeper pockets and bigger talents and all that kind of thing, or more talent. So I would suggest that we offer an invitation. Woman's name escapes me, but you know who it is, right? Allison Sirwa.
Allison Sirwa.
Thank you. Does that make sense, everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else that wants to attend?
I would like to be one, if possible.
Can Carol go that day?
Carol?
I'm happy to go, but happy to defer. Either way, I'm happy to go. But if somebody else wants to go, that's fine too.
Carol, I'll put you down. If something falls through, then we'll convince somebody else to go.
If she can't make it, I'll make it.
The next thing is the joint workshop with Coastal Waters, Fish, and the Board of Selectmen about the harbor master job description. So Justin Dowdy and I have been back and forth emailing, trying to coordinate a date. Still haven't settled on one, but I'm hoping that maybe we can. Well, I was proposing March 6th or 7th, but now there's a school board meeting on the 7th, I believe. Sometime that week to try to get that information. discussed, and hopefully if that Monday can work, then any budget information that needs to be updated, I can update for Wednesday, because that Wednesday, the 8th, is a third budget workshop. So it would be nice going into that budget discussion to have some general idea of what the numbers are going to be. Justin hasn't heard back from members of Coastal Waters and Shellfish, so it's still hard to decide how many of those members are going to be in attendance. But if you're all okay with it, we can advertise for Monday the 6th, 6 o'clock here, and hopefully get that discussion going and figure out a plan.
Yes, yeah.
I can't make it the 6th, but is there enough time to notice that? special meeting?
We have to notice 3 business days.
3?
A little bit separate of the discussion that may be happening on the 6th or another day. I was wondering if Coastal Waters, if you know if they've had a chance, I thought they were going to help look at our existing slopes. Is that right?
That is correct. I have not received any information about that.
Okay, maybe you can ask Justin if they still plan to do that. Thank you.
Is there another
Are you-
meeting?
Are you okay with March 6th or
Is that a Monday? Yep.
next Monday?
Jen said she can't make it.
I
You
won't be
all
here.
want to be there?
It would be great to have the meeting before that next budget session if we can.
Oh, it's only the third one. You'll have the fourth one to discuss
Yeah,
further.
I think I will say, I know that we didn't mean to jam all the meetings and there were sicknesses and stuff, but there's a lot going on, so.
Yeah.
Let's be as efficient as possible. Thank you.
So we do
So
have.
is that a yes, sir?
That's an I guess so.
Yeah, I guess so. That's kind of the spirit on that.
They would be helpful.
Why don't we shoot for a different date other than the 6th?
Okay.
Just
Yeah,
sometime
that's the only
in plenty of time in advance of that fourth budget session.
Okay, I'll touch base with Justin, and then I'll report something back to you guys for the selectmen's meeting on the 15th. If it's not already set up.
You can always email us to let us know when there's a meeting as well.
I don't know if anybody is available on the 9th, but that's
I am.
just throwing it out there. That's a Thursday.
Thursday the 9th.
Mhm.
I just found out today that there's yoga in the hall on Thursdays from 5:15 to 7:15, I think. So,
Rec Center.
yeah, just that time.
I'll double check with Justin. If the 9th works, then we can proceed with that.
Yeah, and they've met at the public, I mean, at the town office sometimes, right? I mean, we could meet at the fire department or whatever.
Yeah, we can meet there, or we can meet the rec center, usually a backup place.
School.
So are you okay with March 8th, March 9th? Carol?
Yep. Can you hear me?
She said,
I said yes. Yep.
she said yes earlier.
All right. All right, so everybody's in agreement, March 9th is a good date. All right, we'll attempt to get Coastal Waters and see what we can do.
The other thing that I had on there was just as a FYI thing, I'm taking a leadership class through SMCC. So I'm off island 7 Wednesdays over the course of next 3 weeks, next 3 months, and that's something that I started today. So a few Wednesdays between March, April, and May, I will not be in the office. And then the last thing is the broadband update. So this is one of the documents that I shared with you, yesterday, which I think, Mark, you said you didn't get it. There was a broadband meeting last night where this information was shared, and I will share the finances side of it, and then I'll let, Michael Porter, do a little update from the broadband committee where things stand. So basically, just like with anything else, there's been a delay in the project. One of the bigger delays was due to the fact that there was a longer than anticipated process to receive the $300,000 letter of credit through Machias Savings Bank. And it wasn't until after I was done through the process that I realized that I was told that the individual I was working with was new, so they didn't know what they were doing. So that was really the result of the delay. It's part of the contract that's needed for consolidated. There's no plan to use that money. It's just something that has to be there. There's been some minor delay in ordering of the products. The big thing is that because the full $975 bond wasn't received, there's the setback in having the full money to be able to proceed. So on a positive note, and Michael can speak more to it, and he recently found out this week, notified me that in addition to $800,000+ grant that the town was approved for another $125,000. And so then there was, I just put in a little background about when we voted on this and how we got about to doing the bond. The bond was voted on by the taxpayers to be paid over 20 years. Submitted the application for the fall issue, and we're told that only 250 of that was going to be granted due to the fact that it was considered to be bad money. I put in a quote from the attorney that I had to work with through this process, and essentially what it is it's a project that is using a private company to do the project. So even though the town, the good news is that in a recent email last week that I received, I tried keeping in close contact with the bond bank to make sure that we were in good standings. Because my concern was if we were receiving multiple bond bank loans, then we would have 3 or 4, potentially 5 different loans for the same exact project. They couldn't be combined, and you're looking at different interest rates for different ones, then staggered depending on when you receive the loan, when the due end date would be. And so I was worried about that, but the last email that I got, I was told that currently they have a bit over $1 million in bad money that they're hoping to be able to provide in this bond. And so they're confident at this point that Shabig will be able to receive the full 725. If that happens, then I think we're okay. If not, then I would like to bring it back and have a further conversation about potentially finding alternative ways to get that money. But for now, it seems like it's gonna fall through. So that's something that we'll know more of in about mid-April, a better idea of whether that full amount came through or not. Any question for me? If not, I'll pass it on to Michael to give an update of where the committee stands in terms of starting work and whatnot.
Okay, mostly it's good news. The actual extra grant money is really good news. And the reason for it is that our money was supposed to be made up out of 2 pots at the state level. But one of those pots, so $370,000, was money they could use for any purpose. And the other one was more restricted. And we're right in the middle of restricted pot money. Right, so what we're doing is just what that was designed for. But they want to do some other things. This is the main connectivity authority. They want to do some other things that are not, they couldn't spend that money. So they wanted to free up our $300,000, which they out some more money, federal money, and to make us happier with it, because it has requirements that, actually, it would have to have a performance bond, for example, which it didn't have, we didn't look like. And maybe there are more record keeping requirements. So to make us happy with the change, they added some more money, and Mark Willett negotiated with them for $125,000. The reason, the rationale behind that is there's a big unknown, a little bit technical. Poles have these guy wires that pull the poles up against the pull of the lines. And Consolidated, after we did our budget, after everybody, the last grant cycle did their budgets, decided that you can't use spaces that are available on current anchors. If you put in a new guy wire, you've got to put in your own anchor. Those things are screwed into the ground in some way. And by the time you get one and install it, that's like $500 each, and it could be quite beautiful. So that's a cost out of the blue. It cost Georgetown $170,000, so that bigger, unless they had more poles and more lines. But that's sort of the rationale for $100,000. The 25 part is minor. Cost overruns for it. We're not going to have big cost overruns in machinery and material, because we ordered all the material for the trunk. We ordered the fiber, which is the one with the longest lead time, quite a while ago, back in the summer. So we're in line, and that stuff will come in due course. So we're as protected as we can be against supply chain lead time problems. Okay, where we are is that we're negotiating now with the pole owners, CCI, Consolidated, that is, and CMP. And they have complicated processes. CMP is more accommodating, more reasonable. And we're almost done with them. The agenda item tonight to look at their agreement. Consolidated is also just hammering what to do. The story is we have to get a license for each pole to attach our cables to it. And in order to get that, we have to have sort of kind of status with them, with an agreement and so on first, and certain requirements, including this letter of credit. Selectmen Power has agreed that we don't have to pay for what are called make ready costs, which is moving the wires on the pole if necessary to make room for our cables. Because the state law recently passed and said municipalities didn't have to do that if we were serving unserved populations. And Shabig is an unserved population. Consolidated is going to fight this. There's good news is Somerville is a little bit ahead of us on this, and they are going to PUC with this question. PUC will decide presumably in favor of the state law. Consolidated will appeal, and then I think the thinking is the Attorney General will take it up, and it won't be something we have to pay for. And we'll get the results of that and hopefully benefit. What we have money in the budget for that, those make ready costs, but we don't want to spend it. I mean, it's $300,000. What Somerville, I think, is going to suggest is that they put that, whatever they're required to spend to make ready to consolidate in escrow while it's being worked out, so that the make ready work can proceed. And I think that's a good course for us. Specific proposals later. There's going to be a little problem paying for this bond because of the delays. We're going to need to pay some money before Axiom is getting money in to pay us franchise fee. The shortfall is not great. It's something like $10,000, less than $10,000 in the next fiscal year. We're coming up. the end of the year, September, October. And that's a year away, we don't know what's it will be, but we're in conversation with the Island Institute about getting a grant / loan or some kind of mix to cover this. They've heard of this problem. It's all over the state. So that's where we are now. We've got a year to sort it out. I said at the meeting last night that if it worst comes to worst, I would write town a check $10,000. But we hope that doesn't have to happen. And they call it prepayment taxes or something. Yeah.
Could any of the grant money be used to satisfy that disconnect?
No, we can't use grant money to pay off bonds. That's one of them. We have to, the grant money, we really have to account for. I mean, no one check numbers. We spent so much on this.
I have to keep track of every invoice that goes through the grant, and grants typically are very stringent upon not using that money to pay off existing debt.
Yeah.
And bond bank is, you know, this type of a grant, it wouldn't apply.
I sort of thought we could pay for it to teach the law, just get it back to them. I don't know if that's gonna be possible. But anyway, so it's not a big problem. Questions? It's a really quick one.
I was at the meeting last night, so
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of questions. Wait, Michael, thank you for your clarifications on this and all your committee's done so far. I know it can get complicated when you involve bonding and grants, but good work by you and the group and
This one will, I think, you know, as well as it can. So I wish consultants were more responsive, but
Just one question, who were doing the markups on that legal document regarding the polls?
that was Adam Kagan, who is a lawyer member of our committee.
Oh, okay.
He's a co-person of this here.
Gotcha.
We'll get to it, but when I received it marked up from them, I forwarded to Natalie, and she had a lawyer that, you know, does those kind of particular agreements, look at it versus her.
That's the second set of initials, okay,
Yes.
gotcha. Thank you, and thank you for not just that.
Well, no questions?
The only other thing that I do want to mention is, with the takeaway from the meeting, there is, you know, the recognition that the town's gonna start paying off the bond bank before Axiom starts paying the town. But the big thing that the committee is aiming to do is not having to come back to the town to ask for any additional funds, and so they're going to work very hard to find that alternative to cover that potential difference versus coming to the town for, you know, the difference of 10,000 or whatever it might be.
Quick question, if that disconnect, excuse me, does exist, and the town starts paying back the bond bank earlier than revenue is coming in from Axiom, will that gap get pulled back together at some point after revenues start to flow, or will there always be that gap between when money started flowing out and when money started flowing in?
No, the gap should come together. The problem, as soon as customers start getting served, Axiom's on the hook for paying us whatever the debt service requirement is
Okay,
for that year.
And Mark Willett was on the call last night, or on the meeting last night, so he's well aware that this is the position that the town's in, so he's expecting to, you know, Axiom to start paying off as soon as they're starting to collect the cash.
The broadband reserve is gonna cover everything but this, that 10,000 or 8,000, whatever it is told us.
Do you have a date that you're like aiming for things to start being up and rolling?
The thought is the spring of next year.
2024?
Yeah, it's fall. With the delay, that's not gonna happen.
any other questions?
I I did not get around to being able to do a treasurer's report. 2 weeks between the meetings with the budget meetings in between snuck up on me, and so I apologize, but I did not have that information. Do you have any questions about harbor master, fire department, public works, or any of the other ones? If not, then we do have a quick update from Beth on the facilities committee.
No question.
Well, the question I had, where are we with the CTC committee? We had formed this committee of 2 selectmen to meet with CTC, and we didn't know if that was ever arranged or.
Yeah, he's talking about the parking lot lease.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's myself and Carol White and John Rent and Matt wanted to meet, but my wife and I went on vacation. Then we wanted to meet after I got back. And then now John Rent's leaving, so we weren't able to arrange it. Carol and I are going to talk about some time, but obviously we don't have a lot available at the moment. So we are going to be getting together with them, but we don't have a date yet. That's the short answer.
All right. All right. Anybody else? All right. Beth.
Hi. On behalf of the Building and Facilities Committee, I just wanted to update with you where we are. And we had a meeting on the 26th of January in which we talked about, we updated our committee with the blessing of the Board of Selectmen with going forward with Plan B or the design for to build a new fire and safety building across the street and use the current facility for the town office. So we went ahead with discussion about the ARPA funds, and Vika explained what they were and that we had the actual $36,000 in hand. And you had charged us as a board to go forward with those monies to present something with Port City, or have Port City present a design for updating the town office as it is now and looking at better storage, and the fact that we've all agreed as a team, the rescue and fire and the town office, to have a door go into the training room or the rostrum so that the town can use that. This is going to be very valuable. So Port City was kind of given that charge and explained what they came down on February the 12th, I believe, so it's 2 weeks ago, and went through the town office. And we asked for creativity. What can you do with some monies that's been directed to us, although my understanding is that you've now voted $9,000 for the pool garage, so that gives us a little less. And so they have taken that back, and they're supposed to get it back to us with a plan that we can look at some of the things we can do now, but some of the things that we can do in the future. Because remember, with that plan that we've decided to have a new building for the fire and rescue, and all the reasons financially why it was better to do that, they are being asked to do something presently with a building, and it's sort of the way I look at it, it's putting your thumb in the dike. Let's see if we can keep using what we have, the space we have, by getting better storage and room, so that we can use this for the next how many years until we get funding for a fire station. The thing that I want to update you tonight also about is the fact that we had the grant that we're looking into for heat pumps to be used in that facility. And we had done some work back in the summer trying to find out what had been done. And Bob Ernest was kind enough to take that further, and he knows people in efficiency of Maine, which helps. And they came up with some information that we did do something. As you know, in around 2010, block grant was given. And part of that money was updating the insulation. And I think it's important for you to note that in this grant for heat pumps, it states that it should be the primary source of heat for that building. So I go back and present that to our committee. What I'm trying to say is I'm not sure if we can get a grant for heat pumps, because the important information that I want to share tonight was John Riley got back into his records and indicated that the current town offices were not likely to be a good fit for heat pumps as a primary source, the primary source of heating and cooling. While the attics are well insulated, the walls are uninsulated block. It's a block building, as you all know. So it's hard to insulate that. And I think the floors are uninsulated, are on an uninsulated slab. So we know the attic is insulated, so that's something. It might be worth it for cooling in the office space and to augment space heating. But the existing systems will need to remain in place to be used regularly to maintain comfort. So what I'm saying to you, if we're able to go after that, and we do get heat pumps, we can't rip out what we've got. We need to use that too. And maybe this would be used on the shoulder seasons or in the winter when it's not needed and we have warmer weather. But it's important for us all to know that this is something we can't just yank the existing out. And that was very key information from him. So I wanted to make sure you understood that or knew about it. So Port City's gonna come back to us. We're gonna meet as a team with Port City and our facilities committee to go over what they have, and then they're gonna show us, but then we've got to get a contractor to come up with some guesstimates of what this would cost based on the money that you have, less the money that you took away from us. So I think I'll keep in mind that. We're also, and this is a little bit off subject, but I want to either have you put it on another agenda or you start working on it. I know some of you people have expressed the interest, but I really think, and based on some discussion with some people that are hoping to get on our committee, that you are going to look at in your next meeting, those people that are registered to be on the facilities committee, is that we can see the need for a grant writer. And we have information about CTC uses a grant writer. They've been successful. And I'm hoping that you'll consider it, not just for the facilities committee. We see a lot of grants out there for fire and rescue. Maybe there's some things we need to do for the stone pier. I know that you all are aware of this, but having heard the success of grant writing, I don't think we can just keep brushing this aside. I think we can to get somebody that is schooled in that. And I think there's many of us that are willing to go after information, but to have the person that's going to present it, get it to where it needs to go is what we need. And I think my understanding of those is how are they paid?
I don't know a lot about it, and I definitely can help research it and let you know if you guys can make a decision. But I think a lot of them are paid, whatever, hourly or monthly or what, flat fee, and then they get paid a percentage of whatever grants they bring in. So it's a good incentive for them to get some money for whatever.
So that's all I have tonight, and with that help, do you have any questions for me? I think, oh, Bob, I think there was a motion, I'm sorry, Chris, that we were supposed to bring to you in March around this time some information regarding the plan. Well, we didn't get Port City on board to come out here to really look at the town office until 2 weeks ago. So that's gonna be impossible for us to do, but we know we've got the charge. Thank you.
So do you have a date? Do you have a date from Port City by which they will get us some sketches of what they propose to do?
Vika is on that. We said a couple of weeks, we've given them a couple of weeks, but we're not going to, we're on it. That's all.
So the second point, as you know, I've spoken with John extensively as well, in addition to the people from that earlier work that was done with the block grant. The term primary heat source, I think in the two different conversations might mean two different things. And I think that combined with the fact that Efficiency Maine really wants people to put in heat pumps. I think there's a potential path for us. We are going to have to keep the existing heat system, but to translate that one into our backup heat and have the new heat pumps that are put in using Efficiency Maine grant money be the primary heat, where the oil-fired system would not kick in unless we had 10-degree days or 5-degree days or something like that. I think Efficiency Maine might take the bait that that meant the heat pumps are the primary heat system.
And
But
that,
it's all contingent on the sooner we get our application in their stack of applications, I think the better chance there is that we'll get money from them. But we can't do that until we get the drawings from them.
and just so you know, all that information that you had on there, as well as what John has said, has been all sent to Port City. So they know that that's a concern, but I think it's also important that we know, do we have to upfront any money? That's what I'm learning about all these grant things, that all of a sudden, yeah, we're gonna give it to you, but you've got to upfront that and pay for it. And so I want us to all know how this works. So I do have a question in for them about that.
Mark?
Thank you, Beth, for all of this, and we will look forward to the possible improvements and designs for, maybe separate of that. I can't remember where we left off with the upgrade of the electrical service to 400 amp. Is that something that we're going to want to include in this upcoming capital budget, which is probably at least a $15,000 roughly undertaking?
May I say something?
Yep.
We spent at least, what, 2 or 3 meetings going back and forth. Bo met with Ken. We gave you figures, people. We gave you $6,500 for the box and $15,000 to lay the conduit. So we have those rough numbers, but we also now, you're involving broadband. So as a group, this is really important, when you need it, when you can order it. So thank you, Mark. That's something that is got to stay on the top of the list.
Yeah, but because the heat pump systems run off of double pole breakers, so it wouldn't even work in the existing system right now. Thank you.
When we get the info from Port City, and then we put together an initial application package for Efficiency Maine for the heat pumps, I've got a reminder that says include the cost of the upgraded service as part of the grant application for the heat pumps, and see if they take that bait. There's a chance that they would consider the upgraded electrical service as part of the provision or the requirement for the heat pumps. So, no guarantees, but it's worth asking.
In a meeting, our last meeting, Michael Porter attended, and I believe he was asked if there was going to be any money available through the broadband kitty for the health of the generator that we might need, backup generator for everyone, and he said he was going to look into that. So we can all stay on the same page, and maybe we can come up with something unified.
I speak to that a little bit more. We have now a budget, money for a backup generator and a service to the, well, that's the central offices. And it's all one lump item, and some of that's going to have to be there anyway, because it's gonna cost something to run the power up from the firehouse. But, if we can use the power from the firehouse and the backup generator that's there, we wouldn't need to buy a generator. That would be a savings. And some of that would be, probably by cost overruns and other parts of the CO, but some of that ought to be available for, helping with the.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Beth.
All right, moving on. Does anybody have any questions on the other reports? All right, moving on to regular business, 23-013 to discuss survey done by Pascal Incorporated of Bennett Cove Road and take any necessary action. I'm assuming everybody got the survey. Where we do, guys? Where we going?
So,
Yes.
in your opinion, put you on the spot, what was our main purpose for this survey? Just to see exactly where these boundaries are in case we ever decide as a town, as a community, to improve / possibly widen that road and right away down to Venice Cove.
Correct. There was a lot of discussion a few months ago about traffic, residents live closely, not being happy with, you know, the way things are run down there. So there was communication from the barging company about how things could be improved, but the big question was, where is town land? Where does it start and where does it end? That conversation led to getting a survey done to make that determination and then move forward with making decisions about whether you want to look into improving the road, trying to get a barge ramp, or leaving things as they are.
And so that road currently is probably 12 feet wide.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing a number out.
Yeah, it goes to 15 in the turn there.
The only reason I'm saying that is, if you think about the minimum width of a 2-lane road to pass cars is usually 18 feet of travel way, minimum. Over at Cousins Island, when they did that improvement over there, that's only 16, just over 16 feet, and you can just barely pass each other if you're going up. And again, the only reason I'm bringing this up is I haven't measured the width of the existing, but when you talk about minimum travel way of 18 to 20 feet, if you have an engineer draw up a road, they usually won't draw it any less than 20 feet wide to 10 foot. That usually isn't the end of the width of an improved road. You have to have some shoulder and drainage area for the water to pitch off each side and drain down. Again, my only reason for bringing all of this up is if we decide to talk about doing something with that road, it's going to drastically possibly change existing. You know, where's my lawn? Where's the road? oh, don't touch the bushes and trees, you know, it's just natural that people think that way, and maybe they should. So, I'm not sure where I'm going with this conversation tonight. I'm just starting to process it, because, you know, I grew up down there, and it's changed dramatically from what it used to be. Mostly it used to be just people launching boats and driving stuff down there. So if we decide as a town / community that we want to do something down there, I would like it to be a healthy conversation that would involve the neighbors in some form other than just getting everybody in public and hammering on people. We've met, David Hill and I met one time with you, maybe up at David's house. That was just a meeting to try to hear, you know, the concerns and think about what could be done in the short term. And the only thing that we tried, maybe unsuccessfully, was to limit the overnight leaving or parking of vehicles. I think that's the only thing that we've tried so far. Is that accurate? Yeah. So, maybe this will be useful. I don't know yet.
I'll just comment that I thought it was very useful, just to see what exists down there, as far as, I had a really, really hard time reading that fine print though. Well, don't try to blow it up because that doesn't help either, but, when you do get through it, I think it's important to realize that, what's brought us to this was, the level of complaints, and also the fact that it's obvious that with the amount of increased traffic down there with barging and the necessity of that for the island, that it needs to be safer. And in my opinion, the only way to make it safer is to improve that road. And according to this survey, I think it looks like that can be done. And so we just need to start talking, in my opinion, of how we can do that with respect to the neighbors down there, but also realizing the greater good of the community, it's necessary. And that's about all I
I agree with everything that both Mark and Jen have said. And I think function and safety, smooth operation to minimize noise, backups, getting stuck, all that stuff are all good goals. I think what the survey confirms is that the roadway right of way is 49.8 feet wide. And the sketch, the dotted line indicating the current road is in the middle of that in some places, kind of drifts off to one side or the other in other places. I would like to see us go ahead and start moving forward with things like engineering, I'm going to call them sketches as opposed to designs, in combination with community meetings, workshop-oriented meetings, where we talk with stakeholders, including abutters, but other stakeholders as well, people who like to visit that beach, and talk about what are we trying to achieve, what are the things that are sacrosanct, what are the things that we can move forward with. I would, at a minimum, like to see us widen the actual traveling part of the road to 20 feet so that two trucks can pass each other, eliminate the backing up hassle. And then I would like to suggest that, just as a placeholder to get things started, that down by the beach area, that we harden the ramp with appropriate, well-designed, DEP permitted ramp techniques, and that we widen that area beyond the 20 feet to allow successful three-point turns in a safe fashion when trucks are backing off the barge, so that they can turn around and drive forward instead of sometimes trying to back all the way up the hill. I'm not suggesting any final designs at this point, but I am suggesting that we get started sometime soon, maybe after we get past the bulk of the budget season, with a combination of initial engineering approaches and community involvement.
Carol, do you have anything to add?
Basically agree with everybody. I think the town has an obligation to consider management of, some better operations of the area based on folks' input. And I think we can do some of that immediately. Maybe a workshop, but start to come up with some ideas of how to manage the truck traffic a little bit better. And I think we should continue to keep track of the number of vehicles going in and out. The town uses that pretty heavily for our trash. So I feel like we have a responsibility to help manage it. And I don't personally know when it's more challenging, if it's in the summer or not. But I think meeting with a group of butters and stakeholders soon would be wise.
All right, thank you. So my thoughts are kind of pretty much what everybody said is pretty much what I'm thinking also. Just to tack on to what Bob is saying, I think once the budget season's done, we can bring this back up and then talk about possible engineering work, and then have a drawing in hand to approach the community that lives in that area, possibly make a workshop. And then that way other community members can join into the talks. I'd like to see more of the either more detailed about the Bennett's Ranch area, to see if we can get a closer survey on that, just to see where we, do you know if he put pins down?
I do not.
All right. So just curious.
I would suggest that he probably didn't put new pins down, or he would have put them on here.
Yeah, that's all right.
But good to ask.
I wouldn't be able to say.
Well, I've got it blown up on
Oh,
screen,
okay.
and the resolution is not bad when you blow it up on screen.
All right, so what's the board want to do? My suggestion is to table this till after we're done with budget, or the budget slows down, and then bring it back up and then start doing it, or do you guys want to address it now and go out to, and then search for an engineering firm essentially? Mark?
I don't think we're ready yet.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right. All right, now I'll take, so,
Now, this is not about substance, but there's a lot of writing on that drawing as well as drawing lines. And I wanted to say that I have the capability to print that full size as originally printed there, if that would be helpful to anyone.
yeah, yeah, that would be good to have a couple copies to at the town anyway, so it'd be visible for anybody. Appreciate it. Thank you.
If I get the full size.
Awesome. Oh,
Pardon me, in relation to the general notes that Michael just mentioned, I'm not going to pretend to read them right now, but it is relatively easy to bring them up on screen, zoom in. And I wanted to help clarify, Bob, the dashed line that you see represented for the roadway is the 1871 depiction of the county commissioner's road, all right? And it did not follow from the water all the way back to Cottage Road. So Owen Haskell plotted the 1871 road all the way back. It didn't follow, as he says in his notes, and he depicted it from, the corner right here all the way down. He then goes down in the next paragraph to cite case law and the beaten path rule. In 2018, it was verified in this case law and the beaten path rule, as it says right here, that the legal position of the road is as currently traveled. If it's been in use for more than 20 years, as he states in here, that's the place where the road is. So to your comment, Bob, the reason the solid lines follow the road as traveled very well right now is because the solid lines were created from the mid position of the road as traveled. That's how he did it. He went 1.5 rods on each side of the road as currently traveled. Right? That's what you paid the man to do, and that's what he wrote on here. So I would suggest that everybody go through the notes, stop and look at the material and assess what it means. In the south side of the entrance to the beach, or the ramp area, the town's legal position on both placements of the road, the 1871 county road, as well as the 3-rod depiction of the road as currently traveled, show that the town has more rights and interest on the south side there, essentially where the junk lobster boat is, and the pile of traps and all of that stuff. That's the area that this survey shows is available for growth. The concern I have is that this survey shows that the turnaround is not owned by the town, all right? And the town could be denied use of it today if somebody looked at this survey and made an interpretation to that fact. So as part of your discussions, I just wanted to throw out there that to me, that's the biggest risk. Two-way traffic, all those things, everybody needs to figure it out. But right now, not every vehicle comes off that barge facing the beach, ready to drive up the road.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Is it possible to direct, ask someone to clean up the junk piles of stuff that's down there?
Well.
Do we know who it
actually
is?
owns it,
Good luck.
so. Yeah. So the biggest stuff was who actually owned that piece of property.
Mhm.
That's why it was never really followed up. Followed through.
So it's
Just
not,
made
it's
me
the,
show you the Jones.
Yeah,
It's on town property.
It's on town.
yeah,
yeah, no, I'm just saying,
Well, there's
we
also,
never had this before.
isn't there some part of maritime, Michael would know, maritime law relative to abandoned vessels? Do we have the right to move that abandoned vessel?
I think so. For the most part, I think so. They come up from the stone wall.
Yeah, well, there's a time limitation there, but that's been there for a long time, so it's probably expired, yeah.
So we can task our harbor master to look up the information. And see about getting the stuff removed.
Might be more of a legal issue, but I would start with harbor master.
Yeah, at least give us, if there's a law on it, at least give us a direction.
I might first suggest a couple of phone calls. As I understand it, the owner of the boat sold the engine. Okay, the engine was removed from the boat. I don't know if in that conversation, the person who bought the engine was responsible for the disposal of the boat. Couple quick phone calls to the parties involved, and I bet you they'd stand right up and tell you what that deal was and who's responsible for the carcass that lays there right now. All right. Any question about who they are, I'm glad to catch up with you later.
All right,
Yeah, I actually agree with that statement. It's a good place to start.
Yeah.
that's fine with me. Wherever you guys want to start, doesn't matter to me.
well, I think that starts, so we don't forget about it, because
Sorry, that,
Quickly, I've been to a lot of these meetings where this has been a discussion. And I don't remember the road as being the biggest issue as the turnaround was. And you were trying to find out who owned all that. I'm not saying that shouldn't be in this discussion. But first off, you were concerned about all the mess that was down there because that's what you focused on. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
A couple questions and comments. Do I recall that, or maybe you can answer if I phrase it as a question, how much money was appropriated for the survey? I have kind of a figure in my head, but I don't know if it's correct.
We were billed $6,500.
Okay. which is, I think, a little more than,
No, selectmen appropriate $7,000.
oh, okay. So in the common realm, I would like to suggest that when, you know, the engineering sketch or whatever term we want to use is done, that there be accommodations for folks who are accessing the beach in the summer. Maybe over where I think it's Amos's boat, where Amos's boat is. You know, it's been acknowledged on several occasions that it's unsafe for a pedestrian to be down there when the trucks are, you know, congregated and engines are running and the whole 9 yards. So we need to come up with some sort of a plan to make it safer for whatever we want to call it, recreators or pedestrians to access the beach. Sometimes in the summer, that space is tied up with trucks and the barge coming and going for as long as 4 hours. Which is kind of a long time, especially, you know, high tide, swimming, blah, blah. Let me see what else. I think I can accurately say that this winter's barge traffic and subsequent vehicle traffic at times approaches the concentration of the summer. And last week, 5 cement mixers came. At one point, 4 of those cement mixers were between my lower driveway and the beach, and 4 of those cement mixers were backing up all at once. And the reason they didn't back up very far, but my assessment was they were backing up to allow an oncoming truck to get past. So that was, kind of interesting. My neighbor reported that multiple gravel trucks backed up the road this week, I think. I wasn't home when that happened. So, you kind of get the picture that it's, and the barge this winter has landed, 3 and 4 times a day. Which is more, I think, than in the past. I'm not sure. So, what I'm saying is the winter, the concentration is increasing in the winter as well as in the summer.
All right, so I'd like to ask Owen Haskell to add the turnaround section. And I believe his charge was to mark out Venice Cove Road. And that turnaround, I remember in the paper streets that we adopted and kept 30 feet of that, whatever that name of that road was. So that's probably why it's not on here, because it's a separate road.
It is on Cove Road.
So it is part of it?
It's on the survey.
Well, it is on there, but is it part of this, you know, do we own, I want that defined as part of the road. So,
The charge was for him to survey Bennett's Covert.
yes,
The paper street was a different name. So I don't
I'm
know.
just wondering if he can do that relatively cheaply. But I don't know, it's up to the board if we want to pursue that or not.
I think that'll come out. With the engineering work, I think that'll come out.
Okay, you want to wait till then? All right. All right, so, the consensus is to table this till after we're done with the budget. Is that all right? Okay. Moving on. 23-014, to review pole attachment agreements between Central Maine Power and Big Island and take any necessary action. Anybody have any questions?
What action is required of us at this point?
To authorize town administrator to sign the full attachment agreement.
I read through it, I have no questions.
All right.
I went through it, it's a little confusing. I don't have a lot of questions. I think last night from you and your committee members, including at least one who has legal training without offending the rest of you.
And he's the one that looked at it. He looked at it first and then I sent it to our town attorney and then she passed it on to
Yeah,
an attorney that deals with a lot of the internet related stuff and then that didn't work out.
so I didn't hear a lot of concern from Adam Kagan.
The important thing is that Central Maine Power accepted, and I'm going to include in the agreement that we don't pay for maker bills. However, that comes out in the final wording, but that's what it says.
So Vika, if you are signing the agreement, will it be the agreement with these changes from Mr. Kagan and from the attorney who reviewed it after Mr. Kagan? Will you be signing it with those changes accepted by everybody?
If that's what you make a motion on, then yes. So if you authorize it based on these changes, then that's what I would sign and send on to CMP, and then they would sign it and send us a signed copy of theirs.
So has this doctored one gone to CMP?
It has, we don't have the answer, we don't have the answer back.
Okay.
So I would hesitate to say accepting signing additional on these exact changes. Substantively, yes, but not. I don't know what their lawyers are gonna think.
I suggest we hold off until we get the response. I think we have to know what we're authorizing Vika to sign.
Yeah,
Is there a rush?
Yeah, it really is. Every time we wait 2 weeks, see, once we get this approval, once we get approval as a status, somebody's status that they can deal with. which
So
means-
have they told us by when they're going to respond?
No,
I don't feel comfortable authorizing Vika to sign it until we know what it is. She can't sign it until their changes come back anyway.
yeah, true.
so if they do some major or significant changes to it.
Yeah.
Then we got
We would like to know.
Recommend we table
until we get their final version, ideally in markup fashion where we can look and say, Kagan said this, attorney said this, CMP said this. If we can look at that version and sign off on that being the final version, that's after Kagan reviews it, that kind of thing.
I know it's not the most favorable thing, but. Carol, do you have any opinion on this?
I think we need to wait until it's, final before we, this is a long-term commitment. So yeah, I think we gotta have it finalized before we agree. And if we have to do that by email, that's okay.
Jen?
I agree.
All right, so we are tabling the pole attachment agreement between Central Maine Power and Big until we get a more finalized agreement. All right, moving on to 23-015 to discuss potential town land available for use for affordable housing and take any necessary action. I'll hand this over to Bob.
Actually, President of Sika has come tonight to talk about this.
Oh,
Yeah, and Bob will hand it to me. So yes, I'm here, Mike Kowski is president of SECA, which is the nonprofit sponsoring Shabbat Housing, which is a housing effort going on the island. And what I bring before you today is really our invitation and desire to explore with the town some of the resources that we have available for us to meet the challenges that we have around affordable housing today. And we wanted to do so openly and transparently in a spirit of collaboration, rather than just tramping around in the woods and seeing what we could find, which is why we're here with you. To be clear, the proposal that you have before you is not a request for funding, and it is not a request for land. Rather, what we're asking for is an opportunity to walk these 4 different possible parcels that we think might have some promise. And if these look viable, at Sika's expense, to hire surveyor or soil or septic design to kind of work out whether they're going to be viable or not, to work with the facilities committee and with FICA to kind of stay in coordination with what might be happening kind of across the street from the current town office. And then after that work is done, to bring back some ideas and proposals for discussion for this group. And obviously when that happens, they go through a process where we discuss this with you, and then it would have to go through 2 town meetings before anything could happen. So really this is just about giving us a chance to look at the possibilities and have the opportunity to kind of start a discussion about what using some of these town lands might look like. And as I say, I'm happy to answer questions about that. As I say, this is very preliminary, and to explore these possibilities with you all together.
Any questions? Carol, you have any questions?
Yeah, I think at the last meeting, we talked about having a map put together of all the town-owned properties. Is that right?
Yes.
That's been done now on the GIS viewer. Everything that is blue, theoretically, there might be a few errors, but the GIS viewer has been updated so that all town lands are now colored blue.
So yeah, I heard it. I guess, I mean, I don't have any problem with them looking at the properties. I think Sika's on their own initiative has some ideas. I think the town needs to be conscious that, we have to look at the full picture and, might want to consider all the town-owned properties. In other words, Sika has some interest in these specific properties, probably for good reason. And so that's kind of, that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm not opposed to it, but I think before we take any next steps, like any kind of subcommittee with the facilities committee or VICA, that needs to come back to the Board of Selectmen, and we have to decide on a process if we're going to go forward on this, on some kind of property assessment or something. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah. Right. Mark?
I'm also not opposed to looking at or allowing consideration for looking at presently owned taxpayer-owned property for possible housing. But I will say right up front, if I looked at your quick list on the first page, there are 4 possibilities identified on the attached sketch. Probably my first one that I wouldn't have as many concerns about bringing forward to the people would be the first one, which is a 2-acre parcel on the north side of Division Point Road. And I think that's the piece right next to the dirt pit, isn't it? The Cumberland called the soccer field at one point. I'm just
Well, they
saying.
removed,
Yeah.
a few years back, they removed quite a bit of material out of that site or something. I can't remember what.
There
it
was
was.
some-
There's some special sand they needed to cap the dump with. That's why,
That's what it
that's
was.
kind of the cover, sort of pseudo cover, was it was gonna turn it into a sport car.
The second one that I would have, not as many concern or wonder if we were ever gonna do anything with it would be one that I wasn't aware of, I guess. 1.5 acres on Roy Hill Road, part of the back side of the current town office building. And of course, I'm not taking into consideration the neighbors that presently live there. So I don't mean to be insensitive about that. Part of the 9-acre parcel across from the town office, I just don't know what we're gonna do with that as a community. I'm not saying we will build a new fire station right there, and there would be enough room if there was a housing project. I don't know that we won't build a fire station there. I don't know that we might do something else with it. And then the other one, I don't know as much about, but I've walked through part of it. Is a 7-acre upper half of the Carrot property where that trail goes down through.
So Mark, the orange outline on the big 9-acre parcel,
Yeah,
that's roughly the outline of the site plan from Port City Architects in their very, very early drawings of a potential design under proposal B, which was the one we all liked better.
yeah.
It's not to scale. And again, that's part of this, is to look around and see if it makes any sense at all. And if so, then does the housing committee spend money to survey and a layout? This is what Port City says they need. I would also propose, a good use of that land in the future might be a remote parking facility of some type, sort of adjacent to the public safety thing, but all very early days, just all things we need to keep in mind.
So back to my comment very quickly, I won't waste time. It gets back to what Carol just said. I just want to make sure no matter what we do, that we keep some sort of a big picture. And I don't mean to minimize housing or lack thereof not being part of that big picture, but I just want to make sure that we're well thought out. Thank you.
Ralph, on that, I think allowing Sika to walk these sites and do some investigating, the town will benefit from it. We'll get some information that'll be available to us about these sites, whether we go with Sika or anything else. So, yes.
I have one question about the little triangular site behind the town office on the way over. In that area, like historic back and forth, the tax maps are really inaccurate. They show the property line of the town office running right across running right across the apron in front of it, which it doesn't do. So when you look at that, be aware that it's not gonna look like that, okay? Some other places, the tax maps are pretty good, but they're, at least take a handcuff and look at try to find the marks. I have some information I can give you, but it's not exact, and it's only from theory, not from seeing what's around.
Yeah, Bob, I've put my select board hat on. I think to Carol's point, Mark's point, looking at it long-term, I'll use a term that's often misused, which is highest and best use. What is the best thing we could do with these lands? And it might not be affordable housing, or it might be, but there might be something else that's more beneficial to the town. All of these lands are currently not generating any tax revenue. If they were used for home ownership projects, they would generate tax revenue, which would be a benefit. I know at one point, there was a conversation on the select board years ago about potentially selling some town land that was waterfront and a huge amount of revenue that could generate for the town. And it's not something I would propose doing, but it's something we ought to consider. We ought to look at all the different possibilities for all these lands. What's best for the town financially, what's best for the town in terms of sustainability of the year-round community, all those factors. So that's my select board comment.
Mark?
I think I've talked with you about this a little bit, Bob. So the current housing unit that I believe Sika owns down on Schoolhouse Road, that was funded by federal or state housing funds, is that correct?
It's, the property and the structure are owned by Sika. Maine Housing has a very strong claim to that property based on the $310,000, I believe it was, they gave us. And the rest of the cost of that construction was covered with a mortgage through the Genesis Fund, who works in the area of affordable housing. That mortgage was originally $60,000. We paid some of it down early. So that's the detail on that one.
And currently, there's no tax payment coming back to the town because that belongs to a nonprofit.
Yeah.
So in this type of scenario that you just mentioned, you're talking about possibly a different model.
Yes, possibly.
Yeah.
So right now, I could let them speak to this, but.
Well, I don't want to get hung up on it.
Yeah.
Right now, it's not what we're talking about, so I don't mean to stray the.
Right now, Shavik has $840,000 available to build 4 rental units. And some of the plans for that are dependent on LD 2003, and that gets complicated as well.
Yeah.
A very strong possibility for any of these parcels of land, though, would be phase 3 of the Shavik Housing Group's long-term strategy, which would be focused on home ownership. How do we help people who are going to be year-round residents, hopefully with little kids in the school and all that kind of thing, get into homes that they own, even if they've got some sort of deed restrictions or long-term capital gain restrictions or something like that.
Yeah.
In which case they would generate tax. But if they were rental properties owned by something like Sika, then they would not generate property tax.
To try to simplify things tonight, if there's a way to do that in some of our meetings, the actual business item 23-015 says to discuss potential land available, to discuss potential town-owned land, doesn't say owned, but town land available for use for affordable housing and take any necessary action. But aren't we actually just, isn't Sika asking for a possible blessing tonight from the select board for permission to explore these pieces of property? Isn't that really what we're being asked of tonight?
Yes.
And I'm not opposed to that. That's what I'm saying. I'm not opposed to Sika going and looking at these properties. It may irritate some people that don't believe in it or don't want them near their property lines or something like that. And I hope that that's not the case, but it could. I'm not opposed to that. We're still a long ways away, is my point, from even considering asking the voters and taxpayers of Shavik Island to consider this.
Okay.
Just to weigh in on that, you're absolutely correct. This is the beginning of a process, and I hope also, as we begin looking at these, the beginning of some broader community conversations about what these next phases look like. We felt really compelled to move quickly because of the limited and significant grant opportunity we have. But we're under no illusions that my hope is that as we investigate these, and what we really think is a win-win, because any place that we invest
Yes, I'm reading verbatim on the thing. So hire surveyor, soil and septic design firms to determine suitability at Seeker's expense. Work with facility committees and Beacon to stay in touch with the site plan for proposed public safety building. Parking on parcels across North Road from current public safety town office building. I mean, that's what we're asking for. Well, it's long-winded, but it's straight to the point.
Second.
All right, any comments?
I represent the fact that you're calling me long-winded.
Now, I do have a question, Bo. So I'm not, I guess I didn't quite understand. I'm sorry to, partly because you guys, I can't hear you that well, but are we authorizing Sika to work with the facilities committee? Is that what you're saying?
No. Vika is with the facility committee. And it's basically, they're asking for information on where the new building is and just keep them in the loop.
Okay. So they're basically looking for information, not meeting with committees. And I guess the other question I have for Ben is, do I understand correctly that there's no plans to bring a proposal to town meeting for this year?
Not at this juncture, and I'm not anticipating that would be the case.
Okay. Yep.
All right, any other comments?
I have a question.
Yes.
So in terms of Sika hiring anybody and doing any kind of work on the town land, how do you anticipate communicating with the town or relaying any information to the town when that happens? Are you thinking, before or after? So then with any information that you say would be shared with the town, how's the town going to know when there is information that needs to be shared?
So my anticipation, and I may ask Bob to put his build project team Sika hat on in a moment. We all wear so many hats. Is that we would communicate throughout the process, so that you would know when we've looked at the land, when we'd be looking to hire folks, and then of course, if there's any kind of information that came out, we communicate that afterwards as well. One thing that would be helpful is to know who would be best to communicate that with, whether that's, when we send out the emails, should that be you, Vika, or should that be Vika and the select board, or are there other people who need to be a part of that communication so that we can be transparent so everyone knows where we are in the process, but we don't flood people's inboxes with irrelevant emails.
So my suggestion, and let me know if you're wrong, is I would assume that information would be communicated through me, and then I would share it under communications unless any kind of motions need to be carried, in which case it would be an agenda item.
I'm fine with that.
So,
Great. All right. Any other comments from the public? All right. Time to vote. All in favor? Carol, you in favor?
Yeah, I'm fine.
I can't see the screen, I'm sorry.
I can see it.
All right, moving on. 23-016 to discuss stone wharf RFQ and take any necessary actions. All right. So, if you all had a chance to skim through these, there's quite a bit of information. All I pretty much brought was the money, the schedule, the fee schedules form. So I'll open up to the floor.
So, first I would point out, Carol knows far more about this process than I do, but it's hard for her to talk with that thing. I think the three companies from whom we've received proposals all have something to offer. I think their fee structures, when they describe their dollar per hour range for a principal versus a senior engineer, are all pretty similar. And I think I'm guessing the nature of this project is such that, we're not gonna get a firm quote. We're gonna get some kind of an idea of an estimate and a timeline for this very discrete part of the overall project, the sea level rise study part of this project. I would suggest that we move forward, since there's only 3 of them, by interviewing all 3 of them, that we ask each one of the companies to give us an hour with, not with their PR people, not with their senior big time president person, but with the people who are actually going to be doing the work. And that we go into those meetings with a couple of select board members and the town administrator with a prescribed list of questions that we're going to ask them. And then after those interviews, those 3 people come back to this board and say, we recommend number B is our first choice, number C is our second choice, and for whatever reason, some kind of process like that. And that those interviews happen within the next 2 or 3 weeks to keep this moving along. That would be what I wrote down in my notes when I was thinking about it.
All right, anybody else? Mark?
And would these interviews for these prospective firms be by Zoom?
I would assume so.
Okay.
That might be your quickest way of accomplishing it in that
Yeah.
short of a time frame.
And like you say, Carol has way more experience.
She ought to be one of them.
All of us in this, but to answer once again, myself and people that may ask me, the whole goal of this is to come up with a determination of the correct elevation and to help us with FEMA with their interpretation of the height that any facility that is improved, especially with federal and state money, possibly needs to be at. Is that what this company, if we choose one or we're successful choosing one, is going to help us do?
I think so. I think FEMA's current assumption is very, very macro in scale. And the elevation that they would have us design to is probably higher than even a left wing tree hugger like me would suggest.
Higher than necessary.
Yes. And the assignment of this part of the project would be to not just come up with data-driven, correct numbers, but to actually help us work with FEMA as necessary to get them to buy in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I think that the amount of information that all 3 of these companies have given us is quite overwhelming. My question, and Carol, maybe you can answer this better. Is that kind of the way that it normally works? Because I haven't been part of this kind of process before, where you then, after you get this extensive amount of paperwork to read about these companies, then you interview them? Does that sound?
Yeah, I mean, I think because this is essentially a fixed price project, because the grant monies have been determined, and so the parties, definitely Wright Pierce knows what the limit is, and probably the other responders do, because it's public information. I mean, putting myself in their shoes, I would have gone and found out what the amount of money was and then responded. I think there are some, like Bob said, they have some different skill sets, and I don't think we could really, it would be hard to decide without talking to them. I can think of some specific questions that I would ask them, and I'd try to be fair, I'd try to ask all of them the same questions and get the response, but it's really is in the nitty-gritty of the modeling and how they would approach a letter of exception from FEMA, and making sure that they feel they could complete that task with, within some kind of financial scope, So that's really what, to be honest, the grant application was extremely vague. And this is the task that's most specific in the grant application. And I think, we should be able to accomplish it, and potentially then something else even. But the skill sets particularly of Wright Pierce and their collaboration, and Weston and Sampson are worth exploring. And I think because there's only 3, as Bob says, it's probably worth just interviewing all 3. And we could do it in one morning or something like that.
And my concern is just, you know, timeliness of it. Just let's get this done so that it doesn't everything keeps just dragging on and dragging on, because I imagine that dealing with FEMA is gonna take some time.
Well, and frankly, we wouldn't wait for FEMA's decision, probably. I spoke with one of the responders a while ago, and my understanding is that we would do the analysis, submit the information to FEMA, but to be honest, FEMA could take a year or more. So we are probably not going to want to wait for FEMA's response. So that's one of my questions that I would have for the applicants, is kind of, you know, how they would pursue the process. But I think the good news is they're all very qualified. I think we're in a better position to have multiple applicants, and I think, you know, we can evaluate them, I think, you know, within a week or 2 and do it in a morning.
Do you think it should be the whole board or just a couple of selectmen?
I think it could be just a couple of us. It's up to you guys. I don't have any problem with, you know, if it's the whole board, then you got to notice it and it's all that jazz. So, I mean, I think if you want to limit it to a couple people, that's fine.
I would make a recommendation that I reach out to each individual firm, CCing the 2 selectmen that want to participate in the interview process, coordinate the interview time, and then, you know, between the 2 selectmen and myself, we can work up a questionnaire that will ask, and then, you know, if it can coordinate in one day, great. If not, then stagger it over a couple of days to get the 3 of them interviewed. Because I think you're right, it's gonna be easier with all the meetings that we have to notice 1, potentially 3 meetings in advance that could delay things.
Yeah, and in my experience, Vika, when I've been on the receiving end of these, I get a schedule and I can pick a slot, but I think we should try to encourage, you know, unless they really can't do it, if we put it out a week or 2, give them you know, say, we'd like to have you in the slot, and unless, you know, they're going to want the job, they'll try to meet the slot. If they can't, then we can regroup, but trying to do it as efficiently as possible is, you know, for our time too.
I'd like to, excuse me, I'd like to ask if Carol and Bob might consider interviewing on behalf of the select board.
If you're here for time.
I'm for it. All right. All right, well, thank you very much, both of you. I would like to see the questions you're gonna ask, though. We get a copy of those. All right, so Carol, you and Bob and Vika will work together and get some questions for the applicants, and then I'd like a copy, well, it wouldn't hurt to pass on to the rest of the board the questions. And then schedule when you guys meet. Is that all right?
Yeah.
All right. Nothing else on this topic? All right, moving on to communications. I have coastal waters. So we already spoke about that in the TA report. Agriculture workshop, and that is a workshop to
Maine Fishermen Association, Crystal Candy's group.
Yes, thank you very much. So to set up a time with her to have her come up, and she said she'll leave probably an hour and a half at most. So I figure 6 to 8 would be a good time. I didn't know if there was something that would be potentially a warrant on the next meeting. That's why I'd like to do it sooner than later, if the town wants to do some kind of,
Moratorium.
thank you very much, I was trying to remember the word. So if the town wants to go into a mobile or whatever, and so that might be something we do at a town meeting. Sure. Is what I'm saying.
So is this gonna be a meeting with the select board, or is this gonna be a public workshop kind of meeting?
It's a public workshop, but basically the board will be there, so.
Yeah, and then the board could talk afterwards about what they heard and proposing any sort of warrant article for any sort of moratorium, all that kind of thing. If there was a way to hold the public, I was trying to figure out a way to hold it after all these budget meetings. And even as we get into spring, when some more people start showing up who might be interested, but that gets in the way of town meeting schedule, I think.
Her availability is April. She's not able to do it in March. She's got several days in her, and in May, she's, I believe it's her daughter's wedding or something. She's not able to do it.
You're the budget schedule guru. Did things start to calm down a little bit toward the middle of April?
I didn't bring it with me, did you bring?
So we have for Wednesday the 5th, which is probably a regular meeting, and that's our 4th presentation, and 4/11 is a Tuesday, and that's the joint meeting with the school.
Yeah.
And that's all we have for budget as far as in April. We get our final first meeting in May.
Yeah, we have to wrap it up. We have to wrap it up. There can't be any more. Let's go over this and let's add to this.
Yeah, last year, we pushed it to approving it by the selectmen on the last day that you could possibly could before it had to be, advertised and out to
Yeah,
the
we moved
public.
quite a bit of numbers
So
last.
it would be better to not repeat that if possible. Just to add-
Yeah, I would just make things a little less stressful.
So in terms of the workshop, I'm sure a lot of the Lobstermen are gonna want to attend. And my guess is that a Saturday morning might be more well attended than a Thursday evening or a Tuesday evening or anything like that, but I'm just guessing.
Well, they won't be putting stuff up unless they.
They'll be working on both, but they won't be putting stuff over yet. Yeah.
So are you thinking mid-April for this individual?
That's why we're talking about it.
All right, I think mid-April. Did she give you dates or just say the month of April?
She did not give me any dates. I told her, possibly at night and stuff, but I never told her in the morning, so.
Yeah, I'm okay anytime during April that I'm here. I'm not gone much in April, if at all. I think it's a good thing to do, and you guys know more about, well, you want to say something?
So looking at the schedule, if it would be possible to try to do it the first 2 weeks of April, preferably before like the 15th, so then that way it could maybe be as an agenda item on that 19th of April meeting. So then if you do have any kind of warrant articles that you're anticipating to put in town meeting, you're not creeping into May to cut into the deadline. If you want something, an agenda item, then I think you have the first couple of weeks in April to work with.
Yeah, I don't think sorry, I just sort of jumped, but, I think we should, it's not our problem if they can't meet our warrant article schedule. So I think we need to schedule the meeting at our convenience so it doesn't interfere with other things we have to do. And if it turns out that's after a warrant article deadline, and I'm not certain that it's a warrant article or whether, a regular moratorium can be enacted by the board. So I'm not sure what the process is, and it might be good to find out, but all I'm saying is I think this is an initiative that, a third party is interested in getting us on board with, and I don't necessarily think we have to adjust our schedule to meet theirs, but vice versa.
Yeah, and I think Crystal will be able to answer some of that questions, which way to proceed So I can call her back. Is the board willing, if she can do it before the 15th of April? Anytime?
Is this the Board of Selectmen meeting or is this a town public meeting?
It would be a town, well, the board would start it and hand it off, just like I did with the agriculture meeting.
You don't have to.
I don't have to, but.
Yeah, and I honestly feel a little bit differently because the aquaculture meeting was a state agency. This is a nonprofit, somewhat political organization. I'm not against having them come. I just want to be sure we understand, you know, what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think some people want some clarification of what we're talking about, maybe out in the audience.
Okay.
But I also would appreciate, you know, what would the process be in this town / community if we wanted to put a moratorium on something like this or anything? Does this body, the select board, have an amount of authority, or is it town meeting? That would be a good clarification to know.
And then she told me she was gonna state some towns that are currently either in the process or, you know, talking about this, so that would be a good place. I can try to call MMA and see if we can get some information from them also.
Yeah, it's a lobbying organization. The clientele they represent is a clientele near and dear to all our hearts. But we do need to keep in mind that it's a lobbying organization. It's different than the aquaculture thing that we had. The main DMR people that came here, that was, as Carol said, a state agency. That being said, I think we should do it. But I like Mark's question. We need to know for sure. I would prefer, if we were going to propose a moratorium, that we do take it to town meeting for a vote as opposed to this group making a decision. But I don't know what the legalities of that are.
I don't either, very quickly, if I may. I don't care what type of moratorium, I'm not being insensitive to lobstering or aquaculture. But I don't care what type of moratorium you're talking about, you know, it can be not such a small step.
All right. So, evenings during the week and Saturday mornings would be our availability any time between the 1st and the 15th of April. Except for the 5th and the 11th. The 5th is our budget meeting, or our first meeting of the month, and then the 11th is the school meeting.
The 4th, I wouldn't be able to be there. Other than that, I'm available all those times.
Okay.
And I'm gonna express my discomfort with the Board of Selectmen sponsoring a lobbying organization for a public meeting. I just not comfortable with that. I mean, I go ahead and go forward, but I think if the fishermen want to schedule a public meeting with this entity, I'm fine with that. But I'm not as comfortable as you guys.
Well, I have a question.
Can you stop, excuse me,
Sure.
can you tell us what you're talking about? Because we're sitting here, I'm not familiar with what somebody wants to do.
So Ernie approached us about I can't remember what she is from. I do.
Maine
apologize.
Fishermen's Association.
Thank you. Anyway, and she, basically towns are trying to put more restrictions on the aquaculture is going on around their community. And we are a hot place around Big Island. And Ernie expressed some interest in having her come over and talk to the town and see if that's something the town would be interested in. Now, I don't know the specifics on exactly what she's gonna talk about. Ernie's heard about some of it, so that's where.
I respect what, you know, you're saying, but I totally agree with Carol. That this is not a place that you need to be involved.
So Two things. One, I think her request was for her to speak to the select board. I think somehow we've let that morph into the select board sponsoring a workshop, and I'm agreeing with what Carol's saying. So we might want to clarify what her request is, and we might want to have a second thought about the select board sponsoring any lobbying organization, regardless of what they're lobbying for. Secondly, I wanted to add a little bit more detail for the benefit of the public. A lot of the towns, if not most of them, who have entertained the idea of these moratoriums, quite a few have voted yes, quite a few have voted no, but they so far have mostly been towns in the areas where these big salmon farms are being proposed. And I think there's also, so that's more down east, a little bit of mid-coast and down east, where these 100-acre salmon farms with major amounts of effluent and all that thing are happening. Down here, it's a different situation. We've had several aquaculture operations, both oyster and kelp, apply for up to 100 acres leases. Not the small leases that a lot of local people around here have applied for, but corporate entities or people representing corporate entities applying for these big leases. So some moratoriums that some towns have entertained have said, anything over 10 acres, we're putting a moratorium on. Anything over 20 acres, anything over 5 acres, something like that. So that's just more information. I'm not advocating any of it or de-advocating any of it. I'm just saying that's more detail on what's going on. And obviously I read about it a lot because I'm interested in it. Not just as an oyster farmer, but as somebody who wants to protect the bay.
Yeah, and the name of the group is Protect Maine's Fishing Heritage. And they really did sort of come into being in part because of the finfish aquaculture, but it would be like having having us sponsor a workshop for Maine with Maine Aquaculture Association. I wouldn't feel good about that either. So I think what we need to ask for is for the organization, Crystal, to send an email to the town clarifying what's being requested. And then I would feel more comfortable agreeing, because I'm not clear, like Bob said, whether this is to just speak to the selectmen in a public meeting, whether it's to have a public discussion, a public workshop. So I think we need, some official correspondence from her in terms of what she's requesting. And because I'm pretty uncomfortable with sponsoring a lobbying organization.
So I'll go just really quick, and then Beth wanted to comment, not my Beth. But if you read her email, it says, let me know when I can attend one of your select board meetings. So she can attend April 5th, whatever, and be on the, just to speak. And if whoever from the public wants to attend then it's on our agenda and they can attend. And I agree, if the fishing community on the island wants to have someone come and speak to this, then let them organize a meeting and do it, because we have a lot of things on our plate, frankly. So that's my 2 cents.
I would agree with everything Jen said, except for the thing about having her attend the meeting on the 5th, in that she wanted an hour. Yeah, that's a lot to take out of a meeting that is our 4th draft of budget.
Oh, sorry.
So if we wanted to start an hour early, start at 5. We've been doing that a lot lately. I know that's hard for people coming over from the mainland or people who are working till 5. But other than it being that particular chunk of time, our next meeting. Go ahead, Carol.
I would think we could limit it to half an hour. I mean, how much time does she need to sort of get across her, whatever she's got to offer? I mean, I don't think we should dedicate an entire hour to that issue.
I'll go whatever the board says. It was a request that we got from a community member,
Don't forget Beth.
so this is what
I would take that.
Yeah, I can just come to the meeting, say my comment then, but the town has a say in whatever lease gets approved. all the other options are kind of saying what at least is approved. That's,
Okay, well, so I would propose that she come to the April 19th regular Board of Selectmen meeting that's not a budget meeting, and that we give her a half hour to talk to the board. And it's an open board meeting, the way any board meeting is open. But rather than taking away from that budget meeting on the 5th.
I agree with that. And, you know, I know that we want to be accommodating to everyone who wants to come to our meetings and get on. We've got a lot going on. We've got to take care of this budget, and not just the budget, I'm using that as an example. So that the darn thing doesn't keep going in the wrong direction.
Yeah. So that's another thing, well, that'll be my next topic on the future agenda, so, anyway. The other one I had was, so I'll give her April 19th a half hour on the meeting. I'll give her a call and see if she can give me some kind of clarification on requesting
In writing.
in writing and what kind of information she's gonna pose. I'll ask her how other towns have done it also, since she's done it in several other towns, you know, give her some advice. That's pretty much it, unless I forgot something. The other thing was, we got a request from Jim Fowler about him meeting with the select board and with the CEO to talk about future steps. He wants a sense of direction from us. Yeah.
There was a notice. It tells him what he needs to do. I don't know what other role we have other than that notice. I don't think we are really legally able to help him figure that problem out. If he has a proposal for what he wants to do somewhere, then the nature of that proposal would dictate whether it go to the planning board or the Board of Appeals, depending on what piece of land and what he's proposing doing. If he wants to propose a change to the zoning ordinance, his best bet is to carry that forward to the planning board. Personally, I really want to figure out a way to help, but I don't think that's our role.
I agree with that. I've been pretty clear that I'm not willing to enter into consent agreements as a select board that possibly override our existing land use zoning ordinances. I don't think that's a good way to proceed. If we think as a community that we have issues or imperfections or problems with our present zoning, then I think that's a bigger conversation, starting at the planning board level and dribbling down through the community to town meeting.
I agree. I would ask that, you or Vika write back to Jim and, say that that's where we stand. And like Bob said, if he has zoning concerns that he wants changes made, then they go to the planning board. And I think it was pretty clear. Did we ever receive a copy of that?
Should have.
I think it came in email, yeah.
I think so.
I agree with everything Jen just said, except I think that answer to Jim Fowler ought to come from Jim Butler, not from the TA, not from.
But wasn't
Yeah, I
he,
don't-
but wasn't he
requested the
asking
vote.
us?
With me
So-
at all, and so he's never approached me, he's never called since that, so I wouldn't even know the first thing to respond to him.
Right.
So I think that it
So
would,
Jim Butler relayed to us
Oh, okay.
that Jim Fowler wanted to meet. I think the answer to Jim Butler is what we all just said.
Yeah.
And that's that.
Sorry, I was getting our emails mixed up and thought that you sent it
I'll
to
be,
you.
I'll be meeting with, Jim Butler tomorrow. So if the board wants me to, I'll just convey what we're talking about. Is that, Mark?
And I'll just quickly let everybody know that Jim Fowler did attempt to say something to me about us possibly meeting with him, and I urged him to talk with the code enforcement officer about what the expectations were at this point and what the options might be.
It's not my personal preference, but I believe it's what we have
That
to
was
do.
my answer.
I agree with you.
So just to clarify, you'll talk with them tomorrow?
Yeah. Yeah. All
I,
right. Go ahead, Carol.
I just said I agree, and I think we, you know, in the event that this goes forward towards an enforcement action, I hope not, but we need to stay in our lane. So I think it's important. I think Jim's notice of violation made it clear what his options are for the short term.
Thank you. All right, anybody else have any communications?
I have two communications. I received an email from Matt Ridgway from CPC, wondering if the select board had considered further proposing some kind of an ordinance requiring security for large events. If you can remember, this came up towards the end of last summer about mostly coming from hotel wedding parties. I had reached out to Cumberland County to see what the expense would be to extend to Columbus Day coverage, and it was $55,000. And so we kind of left it at potentially could put something or an ordinance requiring that if it was over a certain number. But I just responded to him and I said that at this point, there has not been any further discussion. So I wanted to pass it on to you to see if that's something you want to pick back up, or at this point, just table it and work on the things that are already in front of you.
Okay.
I just remember an extensive discussion about it, and I think I believe we all kind of came to the same conclusion that without putting some sort of, you know, police enforcement required, that, I mean, it gets down to, it doesn't really matter how many people are in a event, you know, that it could be 10 people, it could be 100 people, that you just never know what's gonna occur within that. And I think it's just kind of the luck of the draw, unfortunately. I don't see that we need to discuss this further right now.
Painfully, I have to agree with Jen, but I also question whether we have the statutory right, the ordinance, anything like that, that gives us the ability to tell the holder of an event that they have to provide security. I don't recall seeing anything like that in our ordinances, but Vika, do you know of anything? So I don't know if we agreed as a board that we're gonna make people have security, I don't think we can do that, or I certainly don't know how.
Or I think we would probably, obviously, if we were even going to entertain that, we would need legal guidance on whether we had the authority as a municipality, as a town, as a select board to require through possibly an ordinance, a mass gathering sort of set of rules. I don't know.
From what I remember is we were talking about, all those specific places need a special amusement from us for a year. So that's where we kind of left off, but we talked about the legality of it. We were like, we don't know, and it just fell through. I don't know what happened after that.
There was a recommendation that and I believe it was probably Matt from CDC, to go talk to who the current, managers of, the day-to-day, production down there, but then by the time that meeting took place, then the place closed, and then I think they have a whole new group of people. And so the one attempt of communication that I did make to try to contact them, it wasn't, it didn't lead anywhere, so I think that might be a good follow-up come spring, whoever new comes in, just to put it on their radar and maybe, but at the end of the day, how do you control a drunk people?
Yeah, I vaguely remember basically going
There wasn't
past the owners.
Yeah, and there wasn't much follow-up with them. I didn't have any success at the end of the season.
It's like a formal request from the town asking them to not make them, but just asking. All right, any, what was the other one?
So the last communication I have is that this was an email that I recently received from, the, office of Susan Collins. And it is, the season for congressionally, directed spending. And so I think if you remember, I believe this was, what Donna Damon was trying to go after for the 80-foot ramps on Cousins Island. Anyhow, the deadline for, to apply for anything is creeping up in 2 weeks. And so I wanted to bring it to your attention to see if you felt like there is any particular project that the town has in front of them right now that we're at the place where it would be worth my while to spend some time and fill out, create an account and complete a request and move forward with something. Or if at this point, because it would, if that's the case, then whatever it would be would come to the next agenda item on the 8th, I believe, and then you'd have to approve it and then get submitted and so forth.
So what can you put on for that?
Well, and that's why at this point, I don't know that we have any projects that we've moved enough that we can apply for, but
So I met with Donna and Kim Hamilton last year discussing these CDS grants, and basically we're not at any place that, and it could be a whole gamut of things, but we're not really in any place, in my opinion, where we're ready to step in with, especially in 2 weeks. This is something I, have it on my radar. I have it in a book, but I think number one, it's something that will apply down the line when something big comes up. But it also might be something that a professional grant person would be more in tune to let us know about.
Well, I don't know whether it would be under future agenda items or something Vicky could put on our calendar. I think January 1st of every year, we ought to talk about this deadline. It's probably the same, more or less date every year. And as our current large list of big projects matures, start thinking several weeks out front, whether there's anything on Stone Pier, or whether there's anything on building out the floats, or whether there's anything on Bennett's or whatever that might qualify for it. It's very discretionary, but we shouldn't, I don't think we should say, well, there's money there, what can we spend it on? I think we ought to keep developing our projects, but be aware that this money's out.
Mark, any comments?
No, but I think this discussion brings back Beth Wild's point, where we probably at some point, if we start getting serious about some of these designs and some of these projects, that we should engage somebody that knows the art of grant writing and the timing of grant writing.
Right. Agreed. Kara?
I think in some ways the fire department, public safety building would be low hanging fruit for a CDS because it's a public safety thing and it's pretty predictable in terms of cost. So I think you should consider that. I mean, I've filled out those congressional request forms. They're not as detailed as your typical budget. So I think I did talk with DOT, and the bottom line is they won't even look at a transportation related project unless DOT is on board. So we have to, as far as the Stone Pier goes, we've got to have an endorsement from DOT before we even consider it. The fire, I don't know what the process is for the public safety building, but I think there's maybe maybe more opportunity to get funding for that in some ways because it's such a discrete project, but I think it's not as involved a budget, and it doesn't generally require a grant writer. It's basically you put in this request for a certain amount of money, and then they'll tell you down the line whether or not you're kind of in the running, and then you have to provide usually a little more information. But it has a lot less strings than any other kind of grant. So that's the advantage, is it's kind of, but I think for the Stone Pier, it'll be a little while before we could qualify. The public safety building, all we need is an estimate what the cost is to build the thing.
Do you think we'd be able to use that grant for, say, upgrading 400 amps?
I think it would be a waste of that grant because they're usually millions. I mean, we could apply, but there are a lot of bipartisan infrastructure grants coming down the line, and I have a list that I was given the other day. So there's probably someplace, but I think this grant, we should be looking at something as large as the public safety building or, the Stone Pier. Those are the two projects that would be logical to apply for a CDS. And while Susan Collins has the most clout right now, she got the most. Maine did very well last time, and she got a lot of money. And she's on, so she's in a position of power. And, I don't think we can put it together for this year, but maybe we should look at it for next year.
I was just wondering where the fire department is now nonprofit, right?
Yeah, well, they have a nonprofit, but
Just
they're
a
not
section of
nonprofit.
So would that not pertain to the request of upgrading their radio system? Is that something that could be put in there in 2 weeks, or is that too small?
Too small.
Too small.
Thank you.
If we're done with this, I want to go back to something you were talking about earlier. The police extra security thing. I pulled up the,
Well, go ahead, second. So we are all in agreement that we're not pursuing this for this year.
yep,
All right, go ahead, Bob.
I pulled up the special amusements ordinance. And item 3, item E, appeals. Item 1, any licensee requesting a special. No, I'm sorry. Let's see. C2, in addition to any other penalty which may be provided, the Board of Selectmen may revoke the special amusement permit of any licensee in the municipality. Sorry. There is a section in here that says that excessive noise, music, or dancing, here it is, suspension or revocation. The select boards may, after a public hearing preceded by notice to interested parties, suspend or revoke any special amusement permit which has been issued under this ordinance on the ground that the music, dancing, or entertainment so permitted constitutes a detriment to the public health, safety, or welfare, or violates any municipal regulations. So I'm just saying that if we wanted to go to the new administration of the hotel and say, maybe even before, do these get renewed every year? They do, don't they?
Yes.
To say to them, you need to start providing security for all your weddings. I think we have the ability to do that when we issue that permit. Because the detriment to the public health, safety, and welfare is clearly what CTC is talking about. And I would suggest that we follow that path. I think we should do that.
I think we should get a little bit of clarification on that. If we
Legally, yes.
can, and if we can say it legally, why can't we put it in there? So, yes.
I'm not saying that I don't agree, with that, but maybe where this is a new, management firm, that it might be in the best interest of CTC, since I think this is all originating from, dealing with, intoxicated people on the ferry, that it might be to their best interest to then, advise them to talk to the new management firm that's taken over that, and start there before we go gangbusters into changing, what is it, special amusement
Yes.
permits and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting changing, I was suggesting
mean-
using it as part of a
Yes.
conversation. Yeah.
But let them start, since they're the ones that are having the problem.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about this more once we go for the special, when they come up in May, so.
But can we get a response back to Matt that talks about that?
Yeah.
I can reach out to him and talk to him and follow up.
So, Mark,
I don't mind.
you're right with you, Carol.
I don't mind answering Matt. I think we should over communicate most all the time. But I wouldn't want to just say to the Shebig Transportation Company from the select board, you're on your own, go talk to the end. I would rather have participation and cooperation from the town.
I agree. I think that it should follow with the same recommendation that was done back in the fall of, CDC and the town come in more of working,
Yeah.
together in an effort with the three parties figuring out what the best decision is.
These definitely aren't the old Bill Shuttleworth days.
All right, Carol.
Yeah, I was just gonna say what Mark said. I think the town has a role, and we could put people on notice when we issue those permits that we've had some complaints and concerns, and, the next step would be requiring law enforcement at their expense. So, basically try to get some voluntary improvement. But I think that's the town's role. That's not up to CPC.
Okay.
I do have one last thing, sort of communication I was at, so I can do it quickly if you like.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was at a public hearing, I listened to a public hearing today on this. It's part of the rules that are being put together to go for this affordable housing law, so LD 2003. And I just want to make sure everybody's aware that the town is required to adopt some new ordinances related to this. It's kind of analogous to when they did shoreline zoning, and towns are required to comply. And so the issues that are coming up for towns like us, I think particularly are around the accessory dwelling units, where people can put up to 2 accessory dwelling units on a lot, no matter what size it is. And right now, even, non-conforming lots are not exempt. So it's basically any lot. And there's some very general requirements for wastewater and water, and those are kind of being hammered out in the rules process right now. But I just wanted to be sure and then the other, what a lot of towns are facing are concerns about, seasonal rentals. So a lot of towns are looking at adopting both ordinances. In other words, So everybody just isn't building Airbnbs. And I was at a meeting today and Vinyl Haven said they have 120 Airbnbs right now. And it's affected, the affordability of housing there. So I just want to get on your radar. I think Maine Municipal is working hard to try to, right now, it's supposed to be implemented on July 1st, 2023, which means we'd have to pass an ordinance between now and then. And they're working hard to try to get them to give us another year to implement it. So I think they probably will be able to do that because most towns won't even have time to, it's just too difficult. Some of them are having town meetings already. So, but it definitely has a lot of implications for us as a community. And in terms, it could be a very positive thing on affordable housing wise, but it needs to be managed. And the law is designed to kind of minimize the town control. So we're going to have to kind of explore how we do that and make sure we just don't turn into a bunch of Airbnbs.
So what's that date that they're requiring us to do?
Well,
As of right now, it's July 1, 2023.
Yeah, right now it's July 2023, and that would be pretty tough to meet. I think there's a pretty, I understood today, the sentiment was that there's a pretty good chance it will get delayed by a year, but only a year. And there is technical assistance and funding available for towns like us to provide, they're gonna have a list of people that are available to help us, create these ordinances for our community. So there is money available and I think people available to help us.
All right. Anything else? All right, moving on to items to be placed on future agenda. I got this search for a grant writer. We'll put that on the agenda. Unfortunately, it'll be like April, May.
I get, Beth brought it up to me, what the CTC has done, and that they have hired a grant writer and they've had got money, and I think also the Historical Society is doing that. And maybe it's an opportunity for us in your committee realm, is that maybe we need to be saying, okay, you need to take X amount of money from each committee to build this sort of thing, but in the end, it may be very worthwhile because you all don't have the time that I can see with what you have to do, or is there anybody here? I think Carol is familiar with the grant writing, but it certainly with the ideas of what we all, housing, fire department, town, it's now is the time that might really serve us. So if you put that on the agenda, what is the expectation about information? Is somebody going to be able to come to you with some information on grant writers? I mean, what do you expect from your community, or what are we going to learn from this thing on here?
Well, we can ask CTC, Historical Society. I know the school's gotten one, part-time or whatever. We can gather some information that way.
I already have.
There you go. See, we don't have to go very far.
So it will just be.
So we have some information that we can go by, and it's just, do we want to pursue it or not?
You guys tasked me early on in my position to contact CTC. I have a folder that says grant writing. And you asked me to contact specific organizations on Shebeg, and so I did printed out their response with who they use and how they use it and put it in the folder. I haven't looked at it since.
Or maybe get some quotes from them and more information from the company that they use. So we'll gather some information. All right, anybody else got some future agenda items?
Hey. Do you want to ride? Sorry. Do you want to ride?
Whole attachment agreement, did you say that?
No.
What was that? I missed-
Full attachment agreement?
And Bennett's
The minutes you agreed on would be springtime, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
but I just want to make sure it got on that list.
How about, an update on where things are at on with the Indian Island folks, and you could tell them we need an update for a meeting.
So in my notes, I have that Indian Island update is gonna take place on the 15th.
Of February.
Yeah,
It was 15th of February.
Okay,
as it stands right now, it's, we haven't heard back from that.
can we wrap the page to get a response?
February 15th
It's like-
agenda, I wrote in the back of it. And I have March 15th Indian Island update and planning board update.
What I'm saying is that what Indian Island had told the working group was that Indian Island would give the working group an update by February 15th.
And you haven't.
And they have not gotten it, and we've asked them on the 16th, and they said, we're working on it. It's now 2 weeks past the 16th, so, yeah.
So if we said the March 15th, didn't mean to say that, sorry.
I think she meant it would go back on the agenda on the 15th.
Yes, well, future agenda. items.
All right, anything else?
Planning board is gonna do an update
Yes,
of
thank you.
where they stand with, ordinance changes anticipated for town meeting.
Now, this, when Carol brought up about the new ordinances and stuff, would that go to the planning board first?
Yeah.
With a recommendation on what kind of ordinance changes we have to do?
As Carol mentioned, there will be money and training available for planning boards, assistant money to help planning boards and towns come into compliance. I'm still unclear as to whether we have to change our ordinances or whether it's more a situation that the provisions of 2003 override our ordinances and therefore set us up for legal conflict. But I made a note to investigate that.
I don't want, I didn't, sorry, I didn't mean to open up another can of worms. I just wanted to see, anyway, just a question.
Let's hope they extend it, give us some more time and other towns, some more time to actually get ready for this freight train.
There were a lot of towns there today testifying that they need more.
Yeah.
And the other aspect of it is they need more code enforcement because this is gonna be a bit of a code challenge.
Yeah. All right, Jen had her hand up.
Will we have a decision or review from the RFQs for the Stone Pier by their next meeting?
We'll put it on if it's ready.
It's good that she's got an ongoing list, so. Yeah.
She's right again. I just looked back at my email from Ted Ballard on February 16th. That by March 10, we expect to have survey results and conclusions that we should be able to share and discuss. Therefore, having it on March 15th is exactly correct.
All right.
Don't hurt
Anything
yourself.
else? Anything else? All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
You betcha.
All right. Carol, thanks very much.
Thanks, Carol.
Oh, sorry, this isn't really very fun this way, but it's better than not being there, so.
All right,
Thank you.
have a good night.